Jai Gurudev. Om. Brahmanandam Paramasukhadam Kevalam Jnanamuktim Dvandvatitam Gagana Sadrisham Tattvamasyadilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadhi Sakshi Bhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badaraya Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Sadashivasamaramбhaं Shankaracharya-madhyamam Asmadacharya-paryantam Vande Guru-paramparam Vande Guru-paramparam Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanam Bhunaktu Sahaviryankaravavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayet. Jai Gurudev. We'll start from here. When does Ishvara assume a body? Because human beings enjoy free will, there may be abuse which can lead to destruction of law and order, dharma. When this destruction occurs, a person can no longer follow legitimate means for achieving legitimate ends. Nor can the person follow the means for gaining moksha because the society is not at all conducive to such a pursuit. Even for a person to pursue prosperity legitimately, there must be an order, an infrastructure, a structure of law and order that the majority of people follow. We can see this in a simple game of football. If no one follows the rules of the game, there is no game. Suppose the players dispose of the referees and blow their own whistles whenever they are not winning. How can there be any game? There is no football played. There is only a free for all. Similarly, the game of life cannot be played and enjoyed if there are no rules. In the home itself, certain rules are required so that daily life can proceed in an orderly way. And if these rules are not followed, there will be no home, only a mess. Society is the same. It is true that there will always be some foul play, as there is in any game. But if the majority of players refuse to follow the rules, the problem becomes enormous and cannot be ignored. This kind of a problem is called dharmasya glanihi, the decline in right living. The infrastructure for human behavior is based upon one's free will, and when this free will is abused at every turn, something drastic needs to be done. To put things in order requires a drastic action, and this drastic action is done by Ishvara, although Ishvara himself does not really decide to do anything. Like all actions, this drastic action is a result, a karma phala, of another action, a total action, everyone's prayers, a total prayer. When people who want to follow dharma suffer at the hands of others, they find it impossible to follow dharma. As a result, moksha is not possible. When such a situation occurs, everyone prays because they want something to be done. Adharma is the real cause for the destruction of dharma. Strictly speaking, dharma is not something that can be destroyed. It is not something that can be burnt up. For example, dharma is not a thing. It is a value that people follow. Only in these terms, then, can dharma be destroyed. If people do not follow dharma, then dharma is said to be destroyed. Dharmasya glanihi bhavati. Also, the cause for the destruction of dharma is not merely the failure of people to follow it. All that really happens if people do not follow their dharma is that they do not get certain results. The real problem here is that when there is any decline in dharma, there is always a corresponding increase in adharma. If a person is not following dharma and cannot remain quiet, what will that person do? Such a person has to do something, and that something will be adharma since the person does not follow dharma. This then is what really brings about the destruction of dharma. If the law and order are not followed, and if values are not respected, an increase in adharma, adharmasya abhyutthanam, will be the natural result. Abhitaha, everywhere, utthanam, rise. So that is abhyutthanam. There will be rampant, flagrant adharma everywhere. This means that people will be following adharma, not dharma. What then can be done when such a situation occurs? As a result of the prayers of all those who want to follow dharma but are not able to because they are suffering at the hands of those who follow adharma, Ishvara assumes a particular form, and that assumed form is called avatara. This concept is not important in the understanding of Vedanta. However, with reference to this particular verse, one does need to know that there is such a thing as avatara, just as one needs to know that karma can be in the form of rituals, prayers, and so on. What they are, how they are connected, and so on are to be understood. Vedanta itself is nothing more than Tattvam Asi. The reality of the self being the whole is Vedanta, and everything else is brought in to support one's understanding of this fact. Krishna himself presents the concept of avatara here by saying, then I bring myself into being in a particular form. Tada atmanam aham srijami. This is where immaculate conception comes in. Even though it was known that Krishna was born of Devaki, his statement indicates that he willfully entered into this particular body. We find in the literature that Krishna, who was essentially none other than Vishnu, was also born out of a pillar on another occasion, Narasimha Avatara. Therefore, his births are definitely not the result of Prakriti. They are not the product of chromosomes inherited from the parents. Krishna clearly states here that he brought this particular physical body into being by himself. Having said that he assumes a body when there is decline in dharma and a rise in adharma, Krishna then goes on to explain why he does this. Paritrāṇāya sadhūnām vināṣāya ca duṣkrtāṃ dharma samsthapanārthāya sambhavami yuge yuge. Sadhunam, of the people committed to dharma, paritranaya, for the protection, cha, and dushkritam, of those who follow adharma, vinashaya, for the destruction of conversion, dharma samsthapanarthaya, for the establishment of dharma, yuge yuge, in every yuga, sambhavami, I come into being. For the protection of those who are committed to dharma and the destruction or conversion of those who follow adharma, and for the establishment of dharma, I come into being in every yuga. Why does an avatara come? It is not to enjoy punya papa, because these do not apply to an avatara. Nor does an avatara come to suffer the life of a samsari. An avatara comes for a threefold purpose. First, he protects the people who are committed to a life of dharma. Paritranaya sadhuna. If they are protected, then dharma is protected. This protection is carried out in many ways, one of which is chastising those who do things that are not in keeping with dharma. Vinashaya dushkrita. The word vinashaya means for the sake of destruction of those who follow adharma. Here the word destruction is more in the sense of conversion of those who follow adharma to the path of dharma. This is the second reason for the avatara to come. In either case, his real task is to establish, or perhaps more appropriately, to re-establish dharma. Dharmasya samsthapanarthaya. This is the third but real reason for the advent of an avatara. How can dharma be re-established? And how can the order dharma be re-established? By making the people live in accordance with it. This is all that can be done. There is no other way of establishing dharma. Because this is not properly understood, people establish institutions of dharma, huge organizations, large buildings, and so on. But even if you create a building for dharma that is bigger than the largest building on earth, those who do not follow dharma will destroy the very building itself and make sure that all efforts to restore it are also destroyed. All religious organizations begin with the intention of establishing dharma, but eventually many of them become adharmic. Institutions do not establish dharma. People do. How? Only by living a life of dharma can dharma be established and protected. How can dharma be protected any other way? To understand this better, let us look at scholarship and how it is protected. Can scholarship be protected by protecting libraries? Libraries are protected only when there are scholars to use them. They are meant for scholars. Only when the scholars are encouraged is scholarship protected. Scholars can be encouraged by creating an atmosphere conducive for scholarship. Then there is an infrastructure, a value for scholarship. For example, if teachers are the lowest paid people in society, as they frequently are, they will naturally be attracted to other vocations. Why should a professor who earns $30,000 a year stay at a university when he or she can make twice as much elsewhere and even more on the side. California's Silicon Valley has attracted many university professors this way. If incomes in the universities were comparable to those elsewhere, those who have a value for study and teaching would stay in the universities. But this does not happen when the gap in earnings is too large. It is true that the people who have a real love for teaching, for study, and the leisure to do so will stay. But it must also be recognized that many of those who remain may be doing so for little more than the extended holidays that the academic year permits. When the atmosphere encourages scholars, everyone will become a scholar, or at least make the attempt, and scholarship will be protected. Similarly, dharma is protected when there is an infrastructure conducive to following it, meaning that the dharmis, those who follow the dharma, are protected. To protect dharma, nothing else can be done. The protection of dharma comes through various forms, through music and the other performing arts, through the fine arts, and various other human expressions. Therefore, you encourage only those institutions, meaning customs, culture, and so on, that are rooted in dharma. Cultural institutions, for example, have a certain bearing on dharma and therefore are to be supported. All of these become the means for protecting dharma. It is only when the people who follow dharma are not protected that you find everything goes punk, not just the music. Because all aspects of living are so intricately connected, dharma just goes if the people who follow it are not protected. People are culture and religion. Therefore, protection of dharma implies the protection of culture, religion, and so on. But there is no culture or religion apart from people. The people alone are religion. No institution is independent of people, especially those institutions connected to dharma. And if within a given structure, there are those who do what is not to be done and do not do what is to be done, such people have to be taught, converted. There was a time in Rishikesh when only sadhus lived there. They spent all their time studying the Shastra. When other people came, because they had become disenchanted with the world, they too would begin studying. A man may have decided to become a sadhu because he had lost his wife, his business, or whatever. The choice of becoming a sadhu has always been available in Indian society. And although this man had become a sadhu, he may not have been interested in studying. But finding that everyone else was studying, he too would begin to study. Today, the reverse happens all too often. A sadhu may go to Rishikesh and those he meets may not be studying. If he starts doing whatever everyone else is doing, he can end up running an ashram or studying the veena. There is nothing wrong with learning music. Music can be used as a kind of sadhana sometimes. It can create devotion. But one should not become a sannyasi to do this. To become a sannyasi and then learn music is not right. But this is what is happening. Other sannyasis learn a few yogasanas and then go to America and open an ashram. Being able to stand on your head for 5 minutes is not a great accomplishment. There is a sadhu in Rishikesh who stands on his head for 2 hours on a rock. What happens to him by performing this asana is not clear, except for the fact that he gets very hungry and eats an enormous number of rotis. This is not to say that asanas are useless. They definitely have a purpose. But the point being made here is that we have heads and we do not use them for the purpose they were intended. Basically, a sannyasi is one who is supposed to be studying the Shastra, Vedanta, to the exclusion of all else. But if he becomes a sannyasi and he starts learning music and does everything else, to the exclusion of learning Shastra, that does not become meaningful. Is it time for Ishvara to come again? Someone may well ask, is it time for the Lord to come again in the form of an incarnation? No, the time is not right because this teaching still attracts people. If, however, a teacher of Gita was being constantly stoned and people were being prevented from coming to the classes, then Krishna as Ishvara would come. But as long as people are still able to listen to classes on the Gita, he need not come. If, however, in a place of 100 people, 80 people are given to a life of adharma, the other 20 cannot follow dharma. They can only pray. Then only does Ishvara come. Dharma only needs to be protected when the adharma is rampant, when there is no law and order whatsoever, when there are no ethics, when no one cares about anyone else, when everyone is totally selfish. Under such circumstances, everyone goes for the convenient and does not bother about following dharma properly. Only when there is rank selfishness, adharma, does the protection of dharma become a necessity. When more dharmis, people who follow dharma, are created, the dushkritas, the people who do wrong deeds, change and adharma is destroyed. Whenever an avatara comes, people are converted. They do change. They give up their life of adharma. This is what is meant by the destruction of adharma. Vinashaya cha dushkritam. The adharmis themselves do not have to be destroyed. Only the adharma has to be given up and dharma re-established. Therefore, Krishna says, in every age I am born. Sambhavami yuge yuge. This is not to suggest that there is a rule whereby one incarnation occurs in every yuga. The only rule here is that whenever dharma declines and adharma increases, whenever adharma is rampant everywhere, when there is no way that dharma can survive, then Ishvara assumes a particular form with the purpose of upholding dharma. This form is called an avatara. Having answered Arjuna's question, Krishna continues to talk about himself, his birth, and the truth. Does anyone want to stop and share anything here? So it is all dependent on the proportion of dharmis and adharmis. Only when there is a tilt in this proportion, like what Swamiji says, it is still not time, he says. Because you're still able to attend Gita classes, people are still attracted to this. So only when this balance also tilts, when people who are teaching Gita are stoned, that is when an avatara is required. This was what
It is
happened.
not the conversion of, destruction of people. It is the destruction of adharma.
Right.
And yeah, and one more thing was, because there was a rise in adharma, dharma is declined.
Mm.
These two statements.
And see, like he said in the earlier chapter, in the earlier paragraphs, if even in a home, there has to be an order. Like in the football game, there needs to be rules to be followed for the game to be played fairly. Still, there will be some fouls that happen. So that little adharma is but inevitable. But if everybody takes the game into his hands, then there is no game being played. That is what happens when adharma increases. Dharmasya glanihi, that is when the dharma declines and adharma increases. Abhyuthanam adharmasya.
Yeah, if you don't use it, you lose it.
You lose it. Like in that example where Rishikesh, earlier it was only sadhus and they would be studying. So even if a person went to Rishikesh, did not have any intention to study, seeing everybody else study, he would also start studying. So that is what happens if the majority proportion is dharmic. Then even those that are adharmic will start following dharma. That is the re-establishment of dharma. Or the conversion of adharmis to dharmis. So even in a house, there has to be an order to be followed. You need to keep your footwear where they are, where the footwear should be. You cannot say, I will follow my own rules and walk in with your footwear that you use outside. And similarly, food is cooked in the kitchen. I mean, there is an order to be followed. It is that we've taken everything for granted that we don't, when we step aside and see if these simple rules are not followed, how the house itself will become a mess. So keeping things in their places, all that becomes very essential in order for you to live your life of dharma. Otherwise, when you come home and everything is haphazard, where is your life of dharma? Where is your purushartha happening? And also the example of corruption. When a person who wants to follow dharma does not want to give bribes, does not want to give any, uh, you know, uh, bribes in order to get his work done. But the majority of people out there are accepting bribes and giving bribes. So where does this person who's following dharma stand if he wants to get his work done in society? He will be as though forced to also become dharmic. So that again is a decline in dharma. Having answered Arjuna's question, Krishna continues to talk about himself, his birth, and the truth. Janma karma cha me divyam evam yo veti tattvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti sorjuna. Arjuna, O Arjuna, may my divyam, divine, janma, birth, cha, and karma, action, yaha, the one who, evam, thus, tattvataha, in reality, veti, knows, saha, that person, deham, body, tyaktva, giving up, punaha, again, janma, birth, na eti, does not gain, mam eti, attains me. Arjuna, me divyam janma cha karma yaha evam tatvatah veti saha deham tyaktva punaha janma na eti mam eti. The one who knows in reality my divine birth and action in this way, O Arjuna, giving up the body, that person is not born again. He attains me. Divya means heavenly in the sense of not worldly. Krishna's birth is referred to as Divyam Janma in order to convey the idea that it is unlike any other birth, but extraordinary. By adding the word Aishwaram here, Shankara makes it clear in his commentary that Krishna's birth is a kind of birth that belongs to Ishvara and is not the same as the birth of a jiva. Also, we are told here that Krishna's actions are not like any other karma. All other karmas are born out of personal want and produce punya and papa. Because this is not the case here, Krishna's actions are of a different type and are called Divyam Karma, Aishwaram Karma. The subject of the verse is the one who knows, Yaha Veti, the truth about Krishna's peculiar birth and karma. This person knows them as they are in reality. Tattvataha Veti. One who knows this truth very clearly does not look upon Krishna as just another person, one who is born, who is different from the world, or who comes and goes. This person sees Krishna's birth and actions as they are in reality. In the second chapter, Krishna had said that what is real, Sat, is not going to change at any time, and that which is not real, Asat, Mithya, is not going to be there all the time. Thus, whether Krishna's body is Vyavaharika, empirically real, or Pratibhasika, a projection, either way, it is still Mithya, not absolutely real. The one who knows the body to be Mithya and Atma to be Satya is the one who knows clearly, Tattvataha Veti. Such a person knows that there is no real birth happening and no real karma being done. The one who knows in reality that Krishna, Ishvara, is not other than oneself and that I am that Parameshwara is a jnani. Such a person, knowing this, having given up the physical body, that is, when the person dies, does not gain another birth. To know Ishvara is to know the Satya, the reality, that which always is. Sat is Atma, and therefore to know Parameshwara is to know oneself. In fact, to know oneself is the only way to know Parameshwara, Brahman. This then is how a person is liberated. While living, the person gains self-knowledge, which is moksha, after which there is no future birth for the person. The jivatva is gone and the person is called jivan mukta, meaning liberated while living. Knowing that one is not a karta, the jivan mukta who is a jnani has no karma and therefore no punya or papa to initiate another birth. Only when one takes oneself to be a doer can there be action that leads to future births. What happens to the jnani after death? If the Jivan Mukta does not take another birth, where does he or she go then? Does a jnani become permanently lodged somewhere? This question is based, of course, on the assumption that if the Jivan Mukta is not subject to rebirth, he or she must be somewhere else. Therefore, is there eternal imprisonment or internment of some kind after death? If not, what is it that happens to the jnani? In response to this question, Krishna says, that person becomes myself. Saha mam eti. The jiva is gone, all that remains is Ishvara. Brahman alone is there. Brahman being Ishvara, which is everything. Therefore, there is no jiva. And when there is no jiva, there is only Ishvara. Only when the jiva cannot gain identity with Ishvara, in terms of knowing they are one and the same, are there two seemingly different entities, Ishvara and jiva. Here, the use of the word eti, gains, must be clearly understood. If it is used in its usual sense, gaining identity with Ishvara would mean that the jiva is like an amoeba ingested by Ishvara. But if the jiva is really a false entity and one understands the nature of oneself, then there is no jiva at all, no individual separate from Ishvara, and all that is there is Ishvara. The problem is one of separation, and there is no separation in fact. All that is there is Ishvara. It is not that Ishvara is someone who is located somewhere and the Jivan Mukta joins him there. Gaining Brahman is strictly in terms of knowledge. Krishna makes use of Arjuna's question. How could you have given this knowledge to Vivashwan in the beginning to reveal the nature of Atma, the cause for grief, and how can one cross over it is a subject matter of the Gita. Although Krishna discusses many topics, he unfolds the subject matter in one continuous flow. Here, having answered Arjuna's most recent question, Krishna once again picks up the thread. You grieve for those who should not be grieved for. Ashocyan anvashochastvam, and continues. So, Mam Eti. So, after realization, when the knowledge dawns, the Jiva becomes a Jivan Mukta, which is nothing but Ishvara. That separation is removed, is lost. वीतरागभयक्रोधा मन्मया मामुपाश्रिताः बहवो ज्ञानतपसा पूता मद्भावमागताः. वीतरागभयक्रोधाः, free from craving, fear and anger. Manmayaha, totally resolved in me. Mam upashritaha, taking refuge in me. Jnana tapasa, by the discipline of knowledge. Putaha, purified. Bahavaha, many. Madbhavam, my nature. Agataha, have come back. Free, let me read the whole thing. Vita raga bhaya krodhaha manmayaha mam upashritaha jnana tapasa taha bhavaha madbhavam agataha. Free from craving, fear and anger, totally resolved in me, taking refuge in me, purified by the discipline of knowledge, many have come back to my nature. We have seen that the one who knows Krishna in reality knows that there is no real birth, janma or action, karma for the person. And if there is no real janma or karma, then who is that person? Here, the person cannot be Mr. Krishna, who is born at a given time and place. So too for everyone. He or she can only be Paramatma. Thus, Krishna says, the one who knows this reaches me. To know Krishna in this way is to know oneself. Ishvara cannot be understood by one who is a jiva, an individual, who does not know the identity between oneself and Ishvara. The limited individual is not going to know that which is all-knowing, omniscient. Even to spell the word omniscient is a problem. Therefore, the most that can be said is that Ishvara's knowledge is not limited. All knowingness, sarvajñatva, can never be understood by an alpagnya, one with limited knowledge. But sarvajñatva is only in relation to alpagnyatva. Both limited knowledge and all knowledge are adjuncts, upadhis, with reference to each other. The division between them being due to upadhi alone. Krishna's statement, only the one who knows the Paramatma reaches me, is to be understood in terms of the Paramatma not being separate from oneself. Krishna had said this before and is merely confirming it here before picking up the topic of sorrow. I'll read this para one more time. All knowingness, sarvajñatva, can never be understood by an alpagnya, one with limited knowledge. But sarvajnatva is only in relation to alpajnatva. Both limited knowledge and all knowledge are adjuncts, upadhis with reference to each other. The division between them being due to upadhi alone. Krishna's statement, only the one who knows the Paramatma reaches me, is to be understood in terms of the Paramatma not being separate from oneself. Krishna had said this before and is merely confirming it here, before picking up the topic of sorrow. Upadhi is something that you use as a tool to indicate a higher truth, right? Like for instance, upadhi, like all our body, mind, intellect, they're all upadhis. Like in China's example, he gives the example of spatika, crystal Shivalinga that is kept in the Garbhagriha of the temple. And if there is a red flower in front of it or a green leaf in front of it, the crystal takes on that the color of the flower or the leaf. And then the pujari might point out saying, see that red, the thing behind the red flower, the one that is red, that is the Shivalinga. So similarly, this alpajnatva is just an upadhi. Similarly, sarvajnatva, they are only upadhis to show the higher truth. Only the one who knows the Paramatma reaches me. This is to be understood in terms that Paramatma is not being separate from oneself. This knowledge had been around since the beginning, Krishna tells Arjuna, and people had always been reaching him in this manner, by knowing. There was nothing new about it. Here again, Krishna says that any number of people have reached him. Bahavaha madbhavam agatah. And why is it that everyone does not reach him? There is no difficulty involved in reaching him, but first one has to recognize that he must be reached. And having recognized this, how is one going to reach him if one is driven by one's craving, fears, and anger? In fact, there is nothing to reach because one is already Paramatma. The question, therefore, is how far one's discerning power extends and what is it that one is choosing. In this verse, the people for whom the craving, fears, and anger have gone away, Vita Raga Bhaya Krodhaha, are described as those who have reached him in terms of knowledge. The nature of fear. We have seen that raga is the craving for objects, and that once raga comes, dvesha in the form of dislike and avoidance is also there. These two always go together, and being powerful are binding in nature. Fear, bhaya, then becomes inevitable because there is always some apprehension with reference to one's ragas and dveshas. Every raga is fraught with fear of the undesirable unknown. This is all that a binding desire or like is about. When there is a binding raga dvesha, such as this must happen for me, raga, this must not happen for me, dvesha, how can there be absence of fear? There is always the fear of things not happening according to one's expectations because raga implies expectation. And whenever there is expectation, there is a possibility of it not being fulfilled. And when this happens, there is a sense of failure. Fear of failure will always be there because one is not omniscient. That things do not always go our way is very clear to us. What we need to understand, therefore, is that fear of the undesirable unknown will be there as long as we are driven by our ragas and dveshas. So once we give up our ragas and dveshas, this fear automatically drops. That is why in our happiness program, we start with, earlier it used to start with expectation reduces joy. The nature of anger. Just as raga dveshas are fraught with fear, they are also fraught with anger, krodha. If a raga is not fulfilled, one's desire, kama, turns into anger against whatever is preventing the desire from being fulfilled. If the obstacle is another person, someone who's standing between you and what you want to accomplish, then your karma turns into krodha. If a binding karma is not there, there is no krodha. But if you think a certain thing must happen and your life will be incomplete if it does not, you cannot avoid anger because your raga is binding. In the wake of the obstruction that is preventing you from fulfilling your raga, there cannot be but anger when your raga is binding. The karma itself turns into anger. Thus, krodha is also there when one's life is controlled by raga dveshas. Whereas, when one lives a life of karma yoga, the raga dveshas are neutralized. By paying attention to his or her raga dveshas with the right attitude, a person becomes vita raga bhaya krodha, meaning one who is relatively free from desire, fear, and anger. These are the people Krishna is discussing here when he says, they become one with me. Manmaya bhavanti. These are the people who have the vision of Ishvara as essentially non-separate from the jiva. The vision of non-difference between Ishvara and jiva. There is no real difference between the jiva and Ishvara, any seeming difference being brought about by upadhi alone and therefore mithya. Since this difference is mithya, non-difference is satya, which is all that counts. This vision of non-difference, abheda buddhi, the vision of the identity of Jiveshwara reflected in the statement, you are that, tattvam asi, is made clear by further analysis, manana, and contemplation, nididhyasana. Those people in whom this vision is clear are referred to in this verse as mamupashrita, those who have totally resolved into Parameshwara alone. For them, there is no longer the mistaken notion that the jiva is separate from Parameshwara. The self is Paramatma, the one who has no doubt whatsoever with reference to this particular vision is called Puta, meaning Shuddha, absolutely pure. In such people, there is not even a dash of impurity because the self, being Paramatma, is always pure. The self is not rendered pure, it is pure. If the self was something that had to be rendered pure, some impurity would always be there. And do these people become pure? And how do these people become pure? By the purifying fire of knowledge. Jnana tapasa. Knowledge is the means, the sadhana. Tapasa here means by the fire of knowledge. By the discipline of knowledge, these people become pure. And how does one become pure by knowledge? The knowledge is that the self has never performed any action and therefore it is not guilty of any action. Nor is it subject to any hurt because it is not and never was an object of anyone else's action. Since the self, Atma, is neither the doer of action nor the object of action, it is always Nitya Shuddha, eternally pure. I will read this paragraph one more time. And how do these people become pure? By the purifying fire of knowledge, jnana tapasa. Knowledge is the means, the sadhana. Tapasa here means by the fire of knowledge. By the discipline of knowledge, these people become pure. And how does one become pure by knowledge? The knowledge is that the self has never performed any action, and therefore it is not guilty of any action. Nor is it subject to any hurt, because it is not and never was an object of anyone else's action. What a relieving statement this is. What a liberating statement. Nor is it subject to any hurt, because it is not and never was an object of anyone else's action. Since the self, Atma, is neither the doer of action nor the object of action, it is always Nitya Shuddha, eternally pure. The people being discussed in this verse were already being.
Dr. Chanda, can you read it once again? It's really not understanding very well.
Yeah. I will read the previous para as well. The self is Paramatma. The one who has no doubt whatsoever with reference to this particular vision is called Puta, meaning Shuddha, absolutely pure. In such people, there is not even a dash of impurity, because the self, being Paramatma, is always pure. The self is not rendered pure, it is pure. If the self was something that had to be rendered pure, some impurity will always be there. And how do these people become pure? By the purifying fire of knowledge, jnana tapasa. Knowledge is the means, the sadhana. Tapasa here means by the fire of knowledge. By the discipline of knowledge, these people become pure. And how does one become pure by knowledge? The knowledge is that the self has never performed any action, and therefore it is not guilty of any action. Nor is it subject to any hurt, because it is not and never was an object of anyone else's action. Since the self, Atma, is neither the doer of action nor the object of action, it is always Nitya Shuddha, eternally pure. The people being discussed in this verse were already Vita Raga Bhaya Krodhas. They already have the necessary preparedness of mind, the Antahkarana Shuddhi through Karma Yoga. It should be noted, however, that this Antahkarana Shuddhi can never be absolute. There is always some Ashuddhi in the form of Raga Dveshas. This is to say, whatever Antahkarana Shuddhi that one gains through Karma Yoga is always relative. Absolute Shuddhi is never achieved, but can only be understood because Atma is absolutely Shuddha always. Whereas relative Shuddhi, Antakarana Shuddhi, is something that is accomplished in the mind. So we are being introduced into a lot of new kind of concepts. It was spoken like Parameshwara and Jiva were referred to as being adjuncts, relative, as upadhis in the beginning, in the earlier chapter, earlier para. And then right now, he's saying Antakarna Shuddhi is relative, because there is always some raga dvesha there. Absolute Shuddhi is never achieved, but can only be understood, because Atma is absolutely Shuddha always. Whereas relative Shuddhi, Antakarana Shuddhi, is something that is accomplished in the mind. Relative and absolute Shuddhi. Relative Shuddhi is a process of growth, a process of maturity, wherein a life of alertness, discipline, commitment, and prayer is involved. Such a life is a life of purification, and being a process, it takes a certain length of time. Absolute Shuddhi cannot be a process of purification because the impure can never become pure by any amount of purifying, no matter what the process is. The self, which is absolutely Shuddha, is already pure. Purity means freedom from raga, dveshas, punyas, papas, freedom from everything, in fact. This purity is the nature of Atma. Atma being nirguna, free of all attributes, akarta, free from doership, and so on. And those who know this are also pure, putas, meaning that they have understood the fact that as Atma, they are eternally pure. They are madbhavam agata, as Krishna puts it, meaning they have come back to me. They have come back to be me. This coming back of Bahavaha, so many jivas, is to be understood in terms of the identity between jiva and Ishvara. It is not that all these jivas have come to Ishvara and are sitting upon him, nor has he collected them all to him so that they have become an integral part of his heart or his being. This particular knowledge reveals the fact that the jiva is Ishvara. Those who know this fact are called jnana nishtas, because not only have they gained the knowledge, but they are well established in it. Reaching Bhagavan is not dependent upon any tapas other than knowledge. Thus to say, purified by discipline, tapasa puta is not enough. The word jnana has to be added because there are other forms of tapas. The pursuit of knowledge is the primary tapas. The word tapas refers to any spiritual or religious discipline. For example, a person who chants the Gayatri mantra for 6 hours is said to be doing religious tapas. A person who observes silence for a length of time is also doing tapas, providing, of course, he or she is doing it for religious purposes as a mental prayer, for example. However, to keep quiet purely out of consideration for others is entirely different. It is not tapas. When a person is performing a spiritual discipline like contemplation or studying the Shastra, it is tapas. Swadhyaya, study of the Shastra, is considered to be a great tapas. Therefore, those who are committed to listening to the Shastra, Shravana, and to the self-enquiry, Vichara, are doing tapas. And although there are many forms of tapas, to become established in this knowledge requires only jnana tapas. The pursuit of knowledge is the tapas. The word jnana is prefixed to tapas to show that jnana nishta does not depend upon any other tapas. This is because moksha is not anything other than being established in this knowledge. There is no other moksha. For moksha, you require knowledge, and for knowledge, you do not require anything else except vichara, inquiry. Thus, the pursuit of knowledge itself is the means. Then what about all the other disciplines? They are all meant for preparing the mind so that this knowledge can take place. This is what is meant by purification of the mind or antakarana shuddhi. Therefore, the other disciplines are all secondary means, whereas knowledge is the primary means. To say that these other disciplines are secondary is not to say that they have no place. The distinction to be understood is that these other disciplines are indirect means for moksha in that they prepare or purify the antakarna, while the pursuit of knowledge is the direct means for the knowledge that is moksha. Should we stop here today and do some manana? Because we have, I think maybe I will just read this one para and then from verse 11 we can start tomorrow. Does everyone come back to Ishvara? Because Krishna uses the word bahavaha, many here. Arjuna could assume that only some people come back to Ishvara and others do not. The word bahavaha, being plural, can refer to any number of jivas starting with 3. The point here is that even if it is just 3, a million or more, a finite number is implied. Arjuna may therefore have asked Krishna, why does he not allow everyone to come to him? To such a question, Krishna could have only answered, I can only take them to me if I am separate from them, but I am them. I'll read this again. Arjuna may therefore have asked Krishna, why does he not allow everyone to come to him? To such a question, Krishna could have only have answered, I can only take them to me if I am separate from them, but I am them. If we were separate, perhaps there might be something I could do about it. But since they are non-separate from me, what can I do? It is not a case of my having to bring them to me because I am already identical with them. There is nothing here that I have to do. As Ishvara, they can invoke me, and in whatever form they invoke me, I bless them. Whatever they desire, they get. Therefore, I am not to blame in this particular situation. I do not have any raga dveshas to fulfill in this matter, nor do I take names out of a hat every day to see that some people suffer and some remain happy, and so on. I do not follow any such rule. In this way, Krishna paves the way for the next section in which he explains how Ishvara is free from any kind of blame with reference to what happens in one's life. Otherwise, we would be left asking why Ishvara blesses one person and not another, and why he is so partial. We often say this, right? Why did God give me this? Or God is punishing me. All that is humbug, actually. All that is foolishness. God does not give. We create our own blueprint of what we receive. All the punya, papa is all self-done. Yeah, we'll go to verse 11 tomorrow. Maybe we'll do a bit of manana on these. On that. So I request everyone to share their takeaways. You can close your eyes, be silent for a minute or so. Let's just go through all that we have gone through right now, and we'll come up with our understanding. So the concept of avatara was given in yesterday's reading, that the avatara is in the order of realities three orders of realities. One is Paramarthika, the absolute reality. Then Vyavaharika, which is the empirical reality, that is as though is. And Pratibhasika, which is subjective reality, like that of a dream. All the mind stuff that we go through, the chaos that we go through in our own mind, our own creation. We are our own creation of our world. What we think, what we understand, what we perceive of the world, all that is the Pratibhasika Satya. So Avatara is given the reality of Pratibhasika, because each of us may understand the Avatara in our own fashion, isn't it? It is not like, for instance, all of us see the apple as an apple. There is no confusion there. But Pratibhasika is dependent upon our own perception of it. So Avatara is that of, it comes into being with the sum total of all the good, the prayers of all good people. When there is a decline in dharma and a rise in adharma, when this tipping of the scales happens, in order to re-establish dharma, and avatara is takes place, and avatara comes into being. And he is not because of any action. It is not because it is of course the avatara comes into birth, and like every birth is the result of some action. This is the result of the karma phalas of all the good people. The prayers that come out of the karma phala that comes out of the prayers of all the good people. And this happens yuge yuge, with every in every age. Yeah, I would request everyone to also share their takeaways. Each one can share one, so that then that will add to our understanding, overall understanding.
Dr. Zanga, isn't it like the Atman Bodha, that basically saying Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, because all it says is I am one with the consciousness. Krishna is within me, and Atma is untouched by our body, mind, thoughts, and feelings. We are to connect with Ishvara within us. So the point of doing tapas and this and that, we are purifying our mind. That Atma is always still untouched by our thoughts, feelings, or actions. Please correct me if I did not understand it.
Very right. No, you're very right. All the other forms of tapas are only to prepare the mind. But ultimately, it is jnana tapasa, because it is that revelation, it is that knowledge that you are nothing but the Atma, you are nothing but Ishvara. And for that, if you remember that example of the person who is a blind person and who wants to, he's been operated by the surgeon. His eyes are padded, and the surgeon says, now open your eyes. But he says, of course, the example there was different. That was to show how Veda is the revealed, is the means of pramana. But then, unless that person opens his eyes, how is he going to see? And how does he confirm that he is able to see? So, this jnana tapasa, the only means, ultimate means of knowledge, ultimate means for gaining moksha is knowledge. It is jnana tapasa, because that misapprehension that we are the jiva, we are the alpajnaha, we are limited, has to go. That understanding that we are atma, we are sarvajnaha, we are complete, we are shuddha, we are nitya shuddha, that comes only with that knowledge. And all other forms of tapas, all the yoga, sudarshan kriya, meditation, all of them are just a means of purifying the mind, preparing it. But what I did not really understand was this relative shuddhi, relative and absolute shuddhi. And somewhere Swamiji had mentioned that antakarna shuddhi, wait a second, let me read that. He says, the people, yeah, it should be noted, however, that this antakarna shuddhi can never be absolute. There is always some ashuddhi in the form of raga dveshas. This is what I didn't quite understand. If someone can, we can deliberate on this. This is to say, where whatever antakarna shuddhi that one gains through karma yoga is always relative. Absolute shuddhi is never achieved, but can only be understood, because Atma is absolutely shuddha always. Whereas relative shuddhi, antakarna shuddhi, is something that is accomplished in the mind. Can anyone talk about this or their understanding of this? Maybe I will read this relative and absolute shuddhi one more time. Relative shuddhi is a process of growth, a process of maturity, whereas a life of alertness, discipline, commitment, and prayer, wherein a life of alertness, discipline, commitment, and prayer is involved. Such a life is a life of purification, and being a process, it takes a certain length of time. Absolute shuddhi cannot be a process of purification, because the impure can never become pure by any amount of purifying, no matter what the process is. The self which is absolutely Shuddha is already pure.
That is because when it is a relative shuddhi, it is related to your manas and your body. Still, we are attached to this realm. That's why it cannot be pure, because still we are connecting ourselves with this realm and not the Ishvara. Maybe that's why there is it cannot be pure, because we identify ourselves with still body and mind.
Mm. Yeah. Therefore, the antakarna shuddhi that one gains through karma yoga is always relative, because there is always some ashuddhi in the form of raga dveshas. But aren't we giving up raga dveshas to attain this antakarna shuddhi? So what is that ashuddhi in the form of raga dveshas that is still there?
Personally, in my case, like when my son met with an accident, that desire came up that he should be healed quickly, and he should not be in pain. So in spite of everything, having knowledge at my base, doing sadhana every day, the desire did creep up. I look at it as to how I need to evolve still further. So that impurity was there. Like somebody pointed out that it should be whatever is best for him should be done by the Almighty. And whatever was his karma, so he faced this accident. So from that point also, like when we keep looking at it, how we need to progress further on this path. So that is still not the purest form of purity. That impurity is still there. Whereas Atma is free from all that. Atma is completely pure. Materialistic desires may not be there, but when it comes to our own people, then that still is there. Some ichha comes up, and therefore that could be said as an impurity.
Also, when we take the example of the rope and the snake, no amount of convincing the person that that is not a snake, it's only a rope, will help. It is only the dawn of light, only when you switch on the light and that person actually sees that it is a rope and not a snake, that understanding, he gets to know that that is a rope and not a snake. Till such time, there is that little ashuddhi, that thing that he, no matter how much you have tried to convince him, if we consider that convincing him to be that antakarna shuddhi that is happening, there is still that lingering maybe doubt that it may not be a rope, it's still a snake. So that understanding, that knowledge of the truth of the absolute Atma happens only with knowledge. So absolute reality is therefore is pure.
And that's because we are not removing the ignorance. It's just that we are bringing in the light. Any amount of removing may not help. It's just bringing up that light would make it.
Like, very right. Thank you, Rinal and Percy ji. Like there was once, I think in Atma Bodh or Bhagavad Gita, I'm not sure where, Bhajagovindam, where we read that no amount, you cannot remove buckets and buckets of darkness from a room to remove darkness. All you require is switching on the light. So in a moment, the moment the light is on, darkness vanishes. So even this antakarna shuddhi that we're talking about is still in the realm of the mind. We are still attached to the mind, like it was very nicely pointed out. So that little ashuddhi is still there. That link to the mind. So a karma yogi is still in a dvaita bhavana. He is still doing things and he's taking everything as Ishvara Prasada, because that is, as long as that duality exists, there is that little ashuddhi that is there. Only when even that dissolves. That is why a karma yogi alone will not attain moksha. But just by doing karma is not going to attain moksha. A karma yogi is one, therefore, by definition, who not only continues doing karma as with an attitude of a karma yogi, he also pursues knowledge side by side. so that when his antakarana is enough purified, then that knowledge can dawn. So ultimately, again and again, Krishna is harping upon the fact that it is knowledge that is liberating. And all of us have to follow this life of karma yoga, as well as stay committed to this knowledge. I particularly like this one paragraph where he talks of commitment to knowledge. I don't know where that came up. And the nature of anger, nature of fear, it's very so beautifully described. One second. And what happens to the jnani after death? Mam eti. It is not like he goes and joins Ishvara. He is Ishvara. So there's no distinction there. So we had this doubt about Avatara, Ishvara, Paramatma, Ramana Maharshi, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. They all merge actually. There is only one. All these distinctions are only in our mind. They're all like Pratibhasika Satyas. So that distinction is gone. There is only one absolute reality. I don't know, where was that commitment to knowledge? I don't know where that came. I think that Jnana Tapasa it's in the last paragraph. So the one who knows in reality that Krishna, Ishvara is not other than oneself, and that I am that Parameshwara is a jnani. So evam yo veti tattvataha. Whoever knows Krishna's birth in its true sense, in reality, he ultimately becomes him. What happens to a jnani after death? Then this very beautiful verse number 10, Vita Raga Bhaya Krodhaha Manmaya Mamu Pashritaha Bahavo Jnana Tapasa Puta Madbhava Magata. That's why even Gurudev says knowledge purifies the intellect. It's very important for knowledge as well. Free from craving, fear, and anger, totally resolved in me, taking refuge in me, purified by the discipline of knowledge, many have come back to my nature. That is why we have all the flavors in.
So we can rightly say, as Patanjali sir has put it, Abhyasa and Vairagya to attain this knowledge.
Yeah, Abhyasa and Vairagya are required to again get rid of our Raga Dveshas. But ultimately, again, just by Abhyasa Vairagya, you're not going to gain anything, right? You're just living a life of dharma there. But you require the aid of Shastras, you require the aid of Vedanta, you require the aid of knowledge to actually understand.
But the even Abhyasa is happening through knowledge. I'm just clearing my doubt. Practice,
Yeah.
whatever you're practicing, it is through knowledge
by
only.
Abhyasa, you will become, your antakarana shuddhi will be clean. You get more light, knowledge only. by Abhyasa, you will get knowledge. And once you reach the knowledge, it is finished. That is what it is.
No, what do you mean by Abhyasa there? That is what is important. What is Abhyasa there? You're talking of Abhyasa as, because if you look at Patanjali Yoga Sutras, he talks of Abhyasa as yoga as a form of discipline, and yoga is what? Chitta vritti nirodha, wherein you quieten the modulations of the mind. So that is Abhyasa. That is what he is meant by Abhyasa, isn't it? So therefore, you are kind of bringing your mind to a certain aspect of stillness. But in that stillness, there is that knowledge that requires to be dawned. For that knowledge is what happens, is required. Ultimately, it is that knowledge is like that light switch.
Yeah, thank you.
Feel the awareness of using the knowledge in day-to-day life as to where am I at in this condition, in this situation. That is important. The practical application of the knowledge. Just having the knowledge itself will not do the trick. How much for my own personal growth on the path of spirituality, how much have I put it into practice, this knowledge? Otherwise, Abhyasa, okay, everybody is doing Abhyasa. But where am I at today?
See, to look everyone as self, that is what is the ultimate. You know, when you are self, everyone is also self. So you don't differentiate between you and the other that time. There is no separation. That is the ultimate. See, when you see others also as you, then all this raga, dvesha, this, that doesn't touch at all. You feel everyone is yours. That is your hand, like a hand. This is my limb. The others are also mine. So all that karuna, the dvesha, that, this, everything is dissolved and you are one. That is what is the practical application of that meaning of the highest knowledge. You don't see any separation between whoever comes, whatever, anybody, even an animal, like this, etc., whatever. They dissolve in you. That is the application of the highest knowledge.
Yeah, very right. And like Percy ji said, we have to apply this knowledge into our thought process. It's basically realigning our thought process into that of a karma yogi. And for that, we will have to look at our raga dveshas, because any object out there, you can either have a raga or a dvesha to it. That is what is this verse number 10 is. Where is this? Raga bhaya krodha. Okay. Vita raga bhaya krodha.
Krodha.
So whenever there is a craving for an object, there is also immediately dvesha that happens because you want to avoid it. And these two are always together. And then bhaya becomes inevitable because there is always some apprehension with reference to one's raga dveshas. Every raga is fraught with the fear of undesirable unknown, of the undesirable unknown.
Now, when you will become fearful, when you separate yourself from the others. See that what we do, the ego busting, you know. When we have a fear in our mind, therefore we have fear in uttering the word and everything, whatever it is. Once that ego goes, that I dissolves, then there is no separation. Then automatic the fear is also gone. Ragas are gone, everything. That is the ultimate knowledge we have to gain. We have to come to that. Everywhere we have to see, we should not see that you are separate, I am separate. We have to be in that state. That is the highest knowledge.
I think we are a little late for today, but can you please read that paragraph again with that fear and all which is explained? Maybe,
Can I?
yeah.
Yeah, let me read this. I was thinking.
I
maybe
just joined because of my weekly follow-up.
I
just
thought, Rinal, if we can do this tomorrow one more time, we'll do verse number 10 tomorrow. We'll start from verse 10. We'll do this nature of fear, raga, dveshas and all again tomorrow, nature of anger, and then we'll go on.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, there is an alarm that I set up. This alarm is like, should I say, revering time. So there's an alarm that goes at 6:30. So I said we will honor that alarm, and we'll close on time, like we start on time. We will also close on time. So then we'll inculcate that discipline of time, and it will be
Yeah.
like we are praying to Kala. And like in your own words, we don't want to get any Kala Sarpa dosha.
Yes.
That's ready with
and I was just hoping that you put up a alarm just that we wake up and see
You said that?
ourselves.
You
Yeah.
said that? Oh my gosh. Yesterday I was thinking I should at 5 to 6:30, like 6:25 our time here. I said there should be an alarm so that 5 minutes it'll be downtime for people, and 6:30 sharp we can close. And I actually set up an alarm today. So let's follow this discipline. We will of course come back to this verse tomorrow.
Yeah. No,
And
I meant the wake up to see ourselves, I said.
to see ourselves. That will happen. Don't worry. Krishna will take care.
Oh, yeah.
He's given us that
Thank you.
surety. Hmm?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And just when you said about the astrology,
Hmm.
just in one sentence, I'll finish this up. Saturn is helping you to do the karma yoga. Shukra is helping you to have bhakti, and Guru is helping you to have the knowledge. So
Oh.
all these grahas are helping you.
Wow. Right. That's nice to know.
in fact, Saturn, no, Shani, comes just to dissolve our ego.
Mm. Om Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat Shri Krishna Arpanamastu. Jai Gurudev.
Jai Gurudev.